Welcome, everyone, to the Real Interrogation Room. I'm Lena Cisco. I'm a former Department of Defense certified military interrogator and the CEO and founder of the Congruency Group and Sector Intelligence. And tonight, I'm going to talk about my biggest pet peeve. So be prepared. It's an informal conversation, but I want to share with you something that just drives me crazy. Are you ready? It's bad questions. And especially when people ask a bad question and they expect a detailed answer and they don't get it. And then they get frustrated with the person that they're asking the question to, when in reality, it's the questioner's fault for asking a bad question. I have a saying that I teach to all of my classes, whether I am training law enforcement, whether I'm training private sector individuals and business owners. If you ask a bad question, be prepared for a bad answer. But if you ask a good specific question, you'll get a good specific answer. So I usually go through what I call the lucky sevens of questioning when I train my clients. I teach them 7 effective question types, 7 ineffective, and then 7 questioning techniques, all for the purposes of vetting information, discovering information, and finding out the truth. So there's one question type, though, that I actually put in both categories of effective and ineffective, and that's a yes/no question. So let's talk about the ineffective use of a yes/no question first. When you ask a yes/no question, it's close-ended, right? You're either going to get a yes or a no. You're not going to get a narrative response. So that means you're not going to get the level and depth of information and details that you may need to discover the truth. So you need to ask an interrogative question, an open-ended question to get that level of detailed information. But if you're after a simple yes and no, then you can ask a yes/no question. The problem is this, is that as adults, we have become so in tune to asking yes/no questions and getting people to respond that when we really need to hone in our questions and make them clear and specific because the stakes are high. I'm hiring someone, right? I am investigating a criminal case. I am interviewing our presidential candidates. Right? When the stakes are high, I can't ask yes and no questions. I have to ask those open-ended interrogative questions because I'm looking for a detailed response, a narrative response from the interviewee, right? Because that's what I'm using to vet whether or not they're being honest, truthful, and how much they know about the question I'm asking. If I ask a yes/no question, it may shut down the conversation. Yes/no questions also give a person a way out of answering a question. They make it really easy for people to lie. And why would I want to do that? I don't want to make it easy for you to lie to me. I want to make it difficult. I want to stress you out and send you to cognitive overload while being non-accusatory and empathetic. Because if you're in cognitive overload, where you have so much stress from trying to lie, trying to remember the lie, not liking the fact that you're lying, that lie is going to unravel at any moment. So the yes and no questions make it easy for people to lie. But I'm going to tell you why I consider them both ineffective and effective. So, if I need detailed information and I need to vet how much you know and whether or not you're being truthful, I'm going to avoid a yes/no question. But if my sole purpose is to know if you're lying to me or if you're being truthful, then I may use it with intention. So now let's talk about how to use a yes/no question for an effective purpose to see if somebody's being honest with you. When I ask someone a yes/no question, I'm looking for 3 things. In a truthful response, a truthful person is going to have no problem answering with a simple yes/no. They don't need to oversell it. They're fine with that. They can say a yes and a no with conviction, right? But liars feel that a yes and no isn't convincing enough, right? So truthful people convey information. Liars convince you of it. They have to convince themselves of a lie. So they don't feel that yes and no is convincing enough. So they will tend to embellish it. And so instead of saying yes, they'll say something like all the time, absolutely, 100%. And instead of saying no, they may say, oh, I would never do that, which is not the same as no. I would never do something doesn't mean you did it, right? So again, I ask a person a yes or no question, number one, because I want to hear whether or not you're going to be willing to answer the question, number one, because liars will tend to avoid it. And then number two, how you answer it. Are you giving me a simple yes or no, or are you embellishing it? The other thing I'm looking for is whether or not you're congruent when you're answering it, right? So I want to see if you're congruent with your head nods and shakes as you are saying yes and no. So a truthful person will be congruent. They'll say yes and keep nodding. They'll say no and shake their head. But a person who's lying will be incongruent most of the time. And they may say, yes, absolutely, or no, I would never do that. That's incongruent. Let me talk about behavioral incongruence because that is the most accurate indicator of deception. When we create a lie, we are accessing our semantic memory and we're pulling down bits of information from our semantic memory. We're trying to piece it all together and create a lie. Now, we have another type of memory. It's called the episodic memory, and that's our memory of autobiographical events. It's events that we've witnessed, that we know, that are truthful. So if you ask me what I did last night, and I'm telling you the truth, I'm going to access my episodic memory, put all those pieces of information together, and tell you what I did last night. If I choose to lie to you, then I have to access my semantic memory because lies can't be created from nothing. They have to come from somewhere. And my semantic memory is just known information. And I try to put chunks of known information, string them together, and create a lie and not tell you what I really did last night. Right? I'm trying to deceive you. When I do that, it creates stress. It's a lot. It takes a lot of cognitive work, mental effort to number one, create a lie, and number two, remember it. And so most of us don't feel good lying, and we have these negative emotions because of the difficulty involved with creating the lie, number one, from not a lot of information, and remembering that lie, number two. That creates stress. It creates anxiety, fear, and worry, which can trip off and set off our stress response system. And then we go into having all the physiological responses to stress, like flushed, sweating, heart rate increase, our pulses increasing. We may shake, quiver, dry out, all of that stuff. And if we get so stressed, we will leave our prefrontal cortex and pop over into our limbic brain. And then everything just goes downhill from there, right? We become irrational, emotional. We can't even think clearly. So let me talk about this. When liars create that lie, they still know the truth. And for anyone out there thinking that people can believe their lie, let me tell you, it's not humanly impossible, right? Can you get really good at telling a lie? Absolutely. You can rehearse it for years and years. People work undercover are really good at lying, but they can't believe their lie. If you're a sound mind, you cannot believe a lie to be truth. When we create that lie from semantic memory, it's still here. But the truthful piece, right? What I really did last night is still in my episodic memory. It's never going to go away. So when you ask me what I did last night, and I have to lie about it, I have to suppress the truth and conjure up the lie. That takes mental effort. That can make me so stressed out and lead to cognitive overload, where my brain just can't handle simple tasks of answering your questions. And if you ask me a yes, no question about the lie I created, and I've already started to stress out, I am going to have an easier time lying to you and maintaining my stress by answering yes or no or overselling it or whatever. But if you're not asking me for details, which don't exist anyway in my lie, then you're giving me a way out. You're going to make it very easy for me to lie. Asking me yes, no questions makes it easy because you're not asking me for details. I don't have to keep creating lies upon lies to get through this interview. But if you ask me interrogative questions, who, what, where, when, why, and how, and they're detailed and specific, then that's going to really stress me out. Because if the information's not there, I now have to create very specific lies. And that's hard to do because that doesn't exist in my semantic memory, all while still trying to suppress the truth. So now you know all the difficulties and the mental effort that's happening when we lie. So if you ask somebody a yes or no question, you're just going to make it easier for them to get out of answering a question and to lie to you. So let me dig in deeper. And I have some video examples I'm going to share with you. When I ask someone a yes, no question, it's for one purpose and one purpose only. I want to know if you're being honest with me. So when I ask you yes and no question, a truthful person, again, will answer yes and no. Typically, they don't need or feel the need to embellish it. They'll answer the question, right? They won't say yes, but, or no, but I think that you think I'm lying to you, right? It's either a yes or a no. If someone says, if I ask somebody, are you lying to me? And they say, no, but I think that you think I'm lying to you. All they had to do is say no. All that other stuff is what I consider to be fluff. It's an oversell. It's an exaggeration. A simple no would suffice. And that but, I call it, it's a coordinated conjunction, but that but sometimes negates the no, and then I'm left with a whole bunch of nonsense. All right. So liars, again, in that convincing mindset, their thoughts are, how do I convince this person? What can I do? What can I say to convince them of my lie? Then their behaviors start reflecting that. Truthful people don't think those thoughts. Truthful people think, what else can I give to this person? What other specific detailed information can I provide so that I'm clear, so that whatever I'm saying makes sense and they understand what I'm trying to say? And those thoughts drive another set of behaviors. So that's why we have behaviors that are indicative of truthful people and behaviors that are indicative of liars. Go back to that yes, no question. I ask you a yes, no question. A truthful person, again, commits to a yes and no with no problem. They don't use no but. They don't provide fluff information. They're congruent with their head nods and shakes. Okay, and that's a cultural thing, but that's another class. So if they're saying no, I should expect the head to be shaking. If they're saying yes, I should expect their head to be nodding. But let me throw in a caveat here. There's also something called the nod of affirmation. And when somebody says no, and they have one downward nod, that could mean that they are in full agreement with that no and not behavioral incongruent, okay? Or behaviorally incongruent. In fact, I do this in my TED Talk. And I have some comments saying, she lied, she's incongruent, she is shaking her head yes when she said, no, we didn't torture detainees at Gitmo. Well, people don't know what they don't know. And that's actually a nod of affirmation saying, no, listen up, people, right? But if I kept nodding, now that's a problem. But if I'm saying we didn't or I didn't, and I'm shaking my head no, that's congruent. If I said I didn't do that and I would never, that's incongruent. So be very careful when it comes to body language and accurately detecting deception in people. It is a science. There's a lot going on. You can't read one book and be good. You can't watch a couple videos. It takes a lot of practice because humans are different and there's so many different caveats and nothing is 100%. But now I've introduced you to the nod of affirmation. So pay attention to that. All right, I want to show you a couple of case studies here. I'm going to show you one I'm pretty certain you're familiar with. His name is Lance Armstrong. All right, for 7 years, he lied to the world because he was taking performance-enhancing drugs and winning the Tour de France illegally. And yet he kept lying and lying. And we know he lied because he came out finally and said he did lie. So I'm going to show you a quick little video clip. And this is when he was lying. And I want you to observe how he answers this very long-winded and confusing, but it's a yes-no question. And I already told you, the truthful people will tend to answer a yes-no question with yes, no, be congruent, right? No additional fluff. Liars will oversell a yes and no, will add the fluff, and will be incongruent with their head nods and shakes. So pay attention here to how Lance answers this yes, no question. And then I'm going to share another video with you. It was 7 years later when he finally came out and admitted to taking the drugs, and he was on the Oprah show. And Oprah interviewed him, and she's going to ask him a yes, no question. And his response to her yes, no question, very different. That's a truthful response. So in our first video, you're going to see a deceptive response. And in the second one, you're going to see a truthful response, all from a yes, no question.
will start my answer by saying that this is too late. I view this situation as one big lie that I repeated a lot of times.
The man who won the Tour de France 7 times, only to have his title stripped away, admitted to using a slew of performance-enhancing drugs in such a matter-of-fact way, you'd never guess he'd done everything in his power to protect this very secret.
Did you ever take banned substances to enhance your cycling performance? Yes. Did you ever blood dope or use blood transfusion to enhance your cycling performance? Yes.
I'm certain you saw the difference in behaviors from Lance's truthful response to his deceptive response. There's one thing I forgot to mention earlier, and it's in regards to behavioral incongruence, especially with a yes-no question, but really any question for that matter. But when people lie, you already know about episodic and semantic memory. And our episodic memory is our truthful memory. It's autobiographical events. Our semantic memory is still truthful known information, but we tap into that to create lies. So when somebody asks us a question and we have to lie about it, our truthful memory pops up first. That's the first thing that comes up from our episodic memory. We have to suppress the truth, and then we have to conjure up the lie. We either have to lie in the fly or remember our rehearsed lie, both of which take a couple extra seconds of time. But our body language is naturally in sync with that first memory, our truthful memory. And so when we go to lie, it contradicts our words that we say, and then you have behavioral incongruence. Let's look at two other videos. They are of President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Both of these two presidential candidates are going to lose credibility in my eyes, and both are going to lose trust of their followers if they continue on with these behaviors of dodging questions. When asked a question, you're going to see both candidates, and I chose both purposely because this is not a political message. And please keep it clean. I don't want any nasty comments. I chose both, and they're good examples of how people refuse to answer a question because they either don't want accountability for it or want to take responsibility for their actions or the answer, or they want to lie about it. You're going to see in both candidates how they dodged the question. President Donald Trump, when asked about the events of January 6th in the White House, instead of answering that question, goes on to talk about how great our borders were. That has nothing to do with the question, right? Just deflected it. To maintain credibility and gain the trust of your followers, take ownership and accountability. Answer the question that was asked of you. That's it. Vice President Kamala Harris, when asked about her opinion on fracking and whether or not she was going to ban it. Well, apparently in 2019, she was, and there's proof. And when asked about it, she deflects it. She doesn't even talk about 2019. She goes right to 2020. That's not the question. Okay. And then she goes on to talk about how, as vice president, she didn't. And if she becomes president, she won't. And she's shaking her head, yes. And some people think, no, that's behaviorally incongruent. Actually, that's congruent to me because she's nodding and agreeing with what she's saying. But the problem isn't that. The problem is she refuses to take accountability for what she said in the past. Listen, we all make wrong decisions. And as we go on in our jobs and in time, we learn more, we become more educated about decisions, and we can change them. That's fine. But take ownership of it. Answer the question that's asked of you and take responsibility. And both of those things will garner you, will gain you the trust from your followers, and will lend to your credibility. So let's look at those two videos.
Let's turn to the issue of democracy. For President Trump, I want to ask you about January 6, 2021. After you rallied your supporters that day, some of them stormed the Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated counting of electoral votes. As president, you swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, very few. On January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest regulations ever. On January 6th, we were respected all over the world. All over the world, we were respected. And then he comes in, and we're now left at. We're like a bunch of stupid people. What happened to the United States' reputation under this man's leadership is horrible, including weaponization, which I'm sure at some point you'll be talking about, where he goes after his political opponent because he can't beat him fair and square.
You have 8 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath for your actions in action on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, but he's saying, oh no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this because I offered 10,000 soldiers to the National Guard, and she turned them down. The mayor of, in writing, by the way, the mayor, in writing, turned it down, the mayor of D.C. They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see. I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it too, and you could feel it. And I said, you ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with her daughter because it made her into a liar. She said, I take full
responsibility for January 6th.
President Biden.
When you were in Congress, you supported the Green New Deal. And in 2019, you said, quote, there is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue,
Sure.
particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
In 2019, I believe, at a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed
That position on the line going forward. I kept my word and I will keep my word.
Okay, that wraps up my session for this evening. Let me recap it because I want you all to be able to use yes, no questions in your life sparingly for the purposes of trying to figure out if you can trust someone or not, right? Is this person being honest with you or are they lying to you? So a truthful person, when asked a yes, no question, number one, has no problem answering the question. Okay. Number two, they usually have no problem just simply stating yes or no. And number three, they're going to be congruent with their head nods and shakes, just like I am now nodding right to you. A liar, okay? If you ask a yes, no question, you're going to make it really easy for people to lie to you, number one. So why would you do that? But if you want to check on one thing to see if they're lying to you, ask that yes, no question. If someone's lying to you, they're going to oversell that yes, no. First, they may even struggle. They may not answer your question. They may avoid it altogether, like we just saw in those two examples I just showed. But if they do decide to lie to you, they may embellish that yes, no. And it could be 100% of the time, always, never. I would never do that. And they could be incongruent with their head nods and shakes. Okay, just something to think about. I think the example of Lance Armstrong is one of the best. It's old, but it's a great one to see how much his behaviors changed from 100% absolutely to yes. That's huge. Okay. So remember that, use it in your life. Of course, it's a lot of other things that we need to use in techniques. I will do more sessions talking about questioning because when you ask a good question, you're guaranteed to get a good answer. And when you get a good answer, you now have detailed information that's going to help you make wiser decisions. All right. Stay safe and I'll see you next time.